Okay, it's after 7:30. I guess we'll get started. Can we all stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome to the Hills-Ballston Lake Central School District Meet the Candidates Night. My name's John Netzel. I work for the Capital Region BOCES Communication Service. They asked me to come tonight and just moderate, try to help the group get through the questions tonight and just kind of observe. So I'm glad to be here. I guess normally the League of Women Voters would be the moderators for something like this, but I'm told that they don't really do uncontested elections. They won't come out for that. So you have me instead. So just go through some of the ground rules for tonight, if you will. We hope to do, a 90-minute forum. We'll see how it goes. So we'll end at 9 o'clock, hopefully sharp. At the start of the forum, we'll start off with the two candidates, Mr. Vaughn and Jen Brat. They will be just spending 3 minutes to introduce themselves, talk a little about themselves, why they're running, things like that. Then we have a series of questions that I will ask. They're questions that were supplied by the League of Women Voters. They're questions that generally are used in contests like this. There's 7 questions. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer the questions tonight. And we hope that people from the audience who are going to ask questions will please do it within a minute or so we can keep it moving. After we're done with that, we're going to, after we go through the League of Women Voters questions, we're going to have start the audience portion of the program. What we're going to do this year is we only have a couple people that wrote down. We were thinking if we had a bigger group, we were going to kind of shuffle and just randomly draw. So, but we have two cards so far. But if anyone else comes in, we obviously add those up. We also have questions coming in online from people who are watching and online watching the thing tonight. Let's see. I think that's it. So why don't we start the forum tonight? Those are basically the ground rules, so let's get going. We're going to ask the candidates just to spend 3 minutes. You don't have to spend your whole 3 minutes, but up to 3 minutes on your opening remarks. So we'll start with James Maughan. Okay.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks to each of you for attending as well. Can you hear me okay? It sounds like it's very quiet here. Okay. I'm usually pretty good on the microphone thing. Is that working better? Okay, we'll try this. Anyway, thanks everyone for coming. John, thank you for hosting as well. We appreciate you coming out here on this evening to help out. So just by way of background, I'm actually an area native. I was born here in Schenectady. My dad worked for GE for years and years and years, and I attended school at Chalmont over on the other side of the river. So after that, I went to Brigham Young University, got an undergraduate degree, and then I did graduate work at Purdue. And when I finished up there, my education opened up just a whole world of opportunity for me. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so enthusiastic about the importance of education. I ended up coming back here to the research center with GE and working here for several years. Had other opportunities, but this was just a great place to come, and I really enjoyed the kind of opportunity that I had here. And then I worked here for a number of years. I've been at the main plant in Schenectady with GE for a number of years. I was in Virginia for a while, and a couple of jobs back here. And now I'm at the GE Research Center. I'm a technology director there for a group called Aerothermal and Mechanical Systems. So my team is a global team across multiple sites with GE. We work on essentially aerodynamic and combustion and mechanical design technologies supporting GE's businesses. My team is only about 2/3 as big as Patrick's, the superintendent's wherever he is, but we spend about twice as much money as he spends. So we know how to go through the money, and we know how to get a lot of help for what we do. But the reason why I want to be on the board is because I got involved with the schools a long time ago. as the kids were in them. Our 4 kids all went through the Pashley, you know, and just a great opportunity. And I attended board functions, and frankly, there was almost nobody there. And I felt like this was important stuff and people should be there. So I just began attending board meetings. And eventually someone twisted my arm just a scooch and said, you know, maybe I should run for the board, so I did, and it's been a real pleasure for me to serve there. I have no particular agenda for the board. I have no particular thing that I want to emphasize more than the other. I want to represent the district as well as I can, and Burnt Hills has got a great reputation, and I want to do my part to make sure that we stay a great school, really the school of choice. So that's why I would be pleased to have your support for the board.
Thanks, James. Jennifer?
I was born and raised here in the district, and I attended high school here and graduated class of '98. I continued in my passion of teaching. I went to Hudson Valley and received my associate's degree, moved on to Russell Sage, received my bachelor's degree in education, and then continued on to get my master's in curriculum and instruction at the University of Phoenix. From there, I did receive my teacher's certification, and I subbed and I taught in various districts. I did sub here in this district, and I did have some full-time teaching jobs, and currently I'm the child care director at the Glenville Y, and I have a strong presence in the community because of the work that I do day in and day out with the kids in our district. And along with that, because I feel so strongly about our school district and continuing with being a very successful school district, I joined the Burnt Hills BPA. I am a board member on the Burnt Hills Business Professional Association. I am also going to be going back into my position of PTA president at Pashley, where my 2 children attend, and they're in 1st grade. Like James, I don't have an agenda of being on the board. I feel very strongly about the school district, and just being a graduate of this school district, I love the district. I love the successes that we have accomplished, and would like to be a part of moving forward as a district and continuing to be a strong presence.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to start now with the questions from the League of Women Voters. We'll start with James on this one. Question 1, the newly enacted New York State regulations tie teacher evaluations to student performance on standardized tests. How should your school district deal with this?
So the question is about teacher evaluations, and you know, teacher quality is clearly a key factor in the quality of our schools and the quality of our education. There are other factors as well. The quality of the students certainly comes into play, and support from the home environment is certainly also very, very important. But neither of those can really be controlled well by the school. And one of the things that the school can control is the quality of the teacher. So it is a very important factor. And I do think that as you measure teacher effectiveness, student performance is one reasonable criterion by which you can measure how effective a student has been. Ultimately, you know, that is an important question to answer through some objective measure. It would be a little bit like trying to critique a restaurant or a chef on everything except how the food actually tasted. And so at some point, did the student actually learn becomes an important criterion to use. And I think it's important to understand that it's not teacher performance. I mean, it's not student performance, it's student progress. How much has the student progressed from wherever they started? By the time you put 20 or 30 students together in a class, you've got a pretty good assessment of how well students in that class have progressed. So I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. This was proposed several years ago at this point, and the state and the teachers union and all of the superintendents and all of the school boards around the country negotiated how that would be. 20-20-60 was a split, with 20% being based on the local evaluation through a test, 20% based on the state test, and 60% based on classroom assessment. And then that was negotiated, and essentially, you know, there were some issues for sure, but it was kind of progressing along. And then what happened was the governor decided that he was going to solve a problem that he saw. And the problem that he saw, I think, is that the system of evaluation that was in place essentially didn't identify any teachers that were less effective. I think the state average was like, or the state number was something like 98.7% were either effective or highly effective. And in Burnt Hills, of the 300 teachers that we have, none of them was considered less effective or ineffective, or developing or ineffective. And so that just didn't seem credible to him. And honestly, when you take 300 people, the chances are good that you're going to find a couple where it's just not a good match anymore. So the governor tried to unilaterally increase that weighting to 50%, and that was not the right thing to do. He should not have done that. And the teachers union responded by encouraging students to opt out of the tests, and they should not have done that. There should have been a more reasonable solution to that. The governor backed away from his plan before the budget was passed in early April, and yet people continued to opt out of the test, and the teachers continued to push the opt out of the test. So I think that was a mess, but the answer to the question is, do I think that student achievement should be one measure of teacher performance? And I do think that's reasonable, yeah.
Okay, great. Jennifer, how do you feel about it?
Again, just like James had referred back in 2011 when the governor proposed the 2020-60, that I find is a reasonable measure. The 50% teacher evaluation, to me, that is unreasonable. I agree with the 2020-60. Kids, when it comes to testing, I strongly believe that there's other factors that go into it. Whereas observing a classroom teacher at a 60%, they can get more out of how effective that teacher is. Some kids do not take tests very well, and so there should be other measures that are put in place to measure effective teachers. I find that pushing the test on the kids and weighing 50% on a teacher's performance and putting their job on the line, that I find is a little excessive, and I feel that teachers can show effectiveness in other ways besides standardized tests.
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to go to the second question. A good school board is made of interested citizens bringing diverse qualities that they can apply to decision making. What special expertise, knowledge, or interest would you bring to the board? We'll start with Jennifer this time.
Again, like I had said in my introduction, I do have a background in education. I have taught in various school districts. I've subbed in this district, and I am in the schools for my job and for my children. So I have a great grasp on the day in and day out of what goes into teaching these kids. And also a lot of the teachers now with their certification, it doesn't go all the way back to birth, whereas I have a degree that goes all the way back to birth, and a lot of problems that may occur in a child's life can stem back to birth. So I do have degrees in every single area. I've worked in every single area, so I do bring that uniqueness to this position.
Okay, great. James?
Yeah, I think that's great. I have a different background. My background is more in business and private industry, with certain things that involves there, and all the things that involved in the board as well, strategy and goals and problem solving and finance, and all those things are required as well. Obviously, I have a deep interest in education and see the value in my own. I have other community experiences. I've had, volunteer service for years with the Boy Scouts. In fact, I was at a Scout committee meeting actually just before coming here. I have experience on the executive board with the Twin Rivers Council and a few other things that kind of give me that background. But I think it's important to recognize too that the board is 7 individuals who work together as a group. And so, it's important that people on the board have different backgrounds and bring different perspectives, because we don't really do anything as individuals. We each represent our own perspective on the board. And we really, sometimes the question also comes up, who do we represent on the board? And some people say, well, we represent the students or we represent the taxpayers. But really, we represent the district as a whole. There's no particular faction in the district that we represent. So I think it's important that people on the board have different backgrounds to bring that diversity of thought, and that's kind of my background.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let me ask both of you now. What is your vision for the district, say 10 years into the future? If you could kind of just look forward. I mean, there's been so much change in the last 10 years. 10 years into the future, and are there any factors that should be dealt with proactively at this point? I'll start with James, I guess. Okay,
alternating, I guess. So my vision for the board kind of goes back to one of the things that motivated me originally to serve on the board, and that is that my kids are in college now. I have 4 kids, they're in college. And the question comes up, when they finish college, where do I want them to relocate? Do I want them to finish school and come back to New York? And I'm actually embarrassed to say that I'm not sure the answer to that question is yes. I'm not sure that New York is the right spot for a young family to come and start a family. And here's some reasons that, here are some things that disturb me about New York, and I made some notes here. You know, New York is number 1 in the state and local tax burden, 13% of per capita income. We're number 1 in spending in the schools. Utah is number 50. They spend about a third as much as we do. Our performance is not great in the national tests. I mean, we're in the middle of the pack as far as school performance. We're 50th in economic competitiveness. That's a survey that just came out in the last month or so. Utah's number 1, for those that keep track of that kind of thing. And now we're number 1 in corruption. 5 Senate majority leaders in a row going down, and now I hear today the one we have might be in trouble as well, and he's only been in a single day. We're number 1 in net domestic migration, meaning that more people have left this state as a percent of the population than any other state in the union. It's about 150,000 people per year, which is essentially what the population of Schenectady County or something. I mean, so these are enormous things that make you say, is it the right decision for people to move to Schenectady to start a family and a career? And so think globally, act locally. My response to that is, what can I do in Burnt Hills to make Burnt Hills a more attractive place to live than all of our neighbors, which is essentially how I look at it. So my 10-year vision for the board and for the school is that we will continue to become increasingly competitive relative to our neighbors for people that want to come to this area. So that's about great academic performance in the school. That's about a controlled spend rate and manageable taxes. That's about a school that's focused on things like academic success and not other political things that can be distracting, that make some communities less desirable. So that's kind of my overarching vision for the district, if you will, is that we become increasingly attractive compared to our neighbors, so that when people do move to New York, or when they consider leaving New York, that the quality of the school and the whole environment here will be a factor that makes people come and prevents people from leaving, hopefully. That's kind of how I see it.
Thank you. Jennifer?
So my vision would be to continue to see the district grow in academic success. With the current obstacles that we're currently facing, it's hard to predict how things will be 10 years from now, but I just know that from my experiences growing up in this district and the successes that I have gained through going to school here and continuing to live in this district, I want that for future families. I think the academic success that the district emphasizes on has been very successful, and I would work very hard to continue that for future students down the road.
Thank you. Question 4 kind of deals with, that's science, technology, engineering, and math are a big part of education today. A lot more than when I was in school, for sure. What is your opinion about today's emphasis on, STEM education? Jennifer?
Well, just by currently being on the board and seeing the presentations from some of the students that every meeting that we have a presentation, I'm just amazed at the amount of knowledge that they have, with the emphasis on STEM. Sitting in those presentations, I'm like, wow, I really missed out on a lot of some of these successes, and that just shows how in the years, so 10 years from now, things could be a lot higher with STEM education. I feel that we're competing with other countries that are further ahead in the STEM related fields, and that putting a strong emphasis on the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is highly needed, so that we can stay competitive with surrounding countries.
Okay. James?
So, from my background, you won't be surprised to know that I support
Sure.
science and technology and engineering and math and all those things. I also support arts and music and language and all those things as well. I think that's important. It's important to be well-rounded about that. But I do support that. I think it's very important to recognize that in many cases that technology has advanced more than our schools have advanced. People talk about manufacturing jobs being lost and such things, which is partially true, but what's really happened is those jobs have advanced to the point where they require more education than they've had before. And if our students across the nation don't get the kind of education that they need for those jobs, then entire communities will be increasingly left behind. And so I think it's important that we continue to progress that. And I'm really glad that we're making a lot of progress in that area. Certainly the new addition on the high school is going to help bring focus and emphasis to that. You know, I brought a copy of the student curriculum guide here, and it's got now a special listing of college credit opportunities. This list was actually stagnant for many years, but now it's beginning to grow again as new advanced placement classes, new other opportunities for college credit, largely, not entirely, but largely around science and technology and engineering and math. So I'm very happy to see that list growing again in the spirit of, you know, let's be competitive and offer things that people want to see when they come here. So, you know, I support that, not to the exclusion of other things. I think it's got to be well balanced in the school, but I do think that's an important area of focus for us.
Okay, great. Switching gears a little, how do you see the role of dialogue and openness in the process of, you know, decision making when you're on the board? James, we'll go back to you.
So I agree completely that the board should be open, and I think that you know, I'm board president this year. Other board presidents in the past, I think, have always focused and stressed that board discussion needs to be in public. It's not a public meeting, but it's held in public so that everybody can see that, and we avoid any kind of discussion that might lead towards a conclusion or policy outside of our board discussions. So in addition to that, I think I've tried to be very open with the decisions that I've made. There have been some occasions when I felt that the board was going in the wrong direction with a particular vote, and I've taken those opportunities, and I won't list them right now because it just irritates people all over again. But you know, to say what I felt and why I felt that way, and I made some great speeches in my day, and they were mostly to empty rooms, but I still felt like it was important for the purposes of the board that people say what they think on important topics.
Good. Okay. Jennifer?
Again, to feed off of what James said, I think honesty is key. You have to be open and upfront with your beliefs, and you know, denying things in the beginning, the truth is always going to come out. So being honest and open and forthcoming of your beliefs and the things that you stand for are out there. And you know, as a group, when making a decision, of course, we're all going to have our own opinions and our own strong feelings, but when coming to a decision, we have to make a decision that's pure and proper for the district. And sometimes we need to set our personal interests and our personal beliefs aside and decide what's best for the district.
Great. Kind of along those lines, how do you both feel that parents, teachers, administrators, and perhaps students can work together to develop educational policies and programs for the district? Jennifer?
You know, it's all about listening to people, and just currently in my position of what I do, it's all about listening and problem solving and working together as a unified team. We're all here on common ground for our students and for our district, and it's not one person's decision over another. It's working as a collaborative group to come to a unified decision of what's the best interest of the district and what's the best interest of our students. We have strong presence in our PTAs, and we listen to people at the board meetings, and you know, it's all about listening to what people's concerns are, because these are their children. These are the people that are teaching our kids and providing them with the education foundation for our future.
Great. James?
Yeah, I agree. It's important to get all those people involved in the decisions, and I think the district has a pretty good track record of doing that. You know, committees like the Blended Learning Committee that's underway right now, the Kindergarten Committee that was earlier, certainly the bond referendum. I mean, all those things involved a lot of participation, you know, in a shared decision-making kind of process, which I think also think is important to point out that doesn't, you know, mean that everybody gets their way all the time, or that everybody gets their way some of the time, or that you hit some compromise that doesn't move effectively in any direction. That's not necessarily what it means, but it means that everybody's got to feel like they were part of the process, even if it didn't go, you know, their particular way at that time. An example would be, you know, this long-term financial planning that John and I and a number of others in the district and in the committee have worked on to kind of bring different interests together and set essentially a long-term financial strategy for the district, the kind of thing that involves lots of interests from lots of different people. I think that's an important kind of stuff to be doing.
Before I, you know, turn it over to that's all the questions from the League of Women Voters supply for us, but Do either one of you want to add anything before we ask the audience further questions? Anything you didn't say that you want to say, or? No? Okay.
No, sir.
We're going to have, we have a couple people that want to ask questions in the audience. Please, ask your question within 1 minute, and the candidates will have 3 minutes again to address those. So first person was Christy Malter. Just come up to the microphone, please, up here. Hopefully it works.
Hi, everybody. As some of you know, I've been intimately familiar with some of the many of the issues that this district has faced in the past 25 or 28 years or so. And one of the things that struck me this year, reading the budget newsletter here for Burnt Hills-Ballston Lake, but also just the statewide news and the local news broadcasts, is that this seems to be a year when there's relatively little interest in school budget votes. I mean, many years we've had hotly contested issues and a great deal of difficulty in communicating with the public about, the choices that we've made here in Burnt Hills-Ballston Lake. And it seems like we're in a period right now where the tax increases have been fairly low, not just here, but in other districts as well. And maybe the tax cap is partly for a reason behind that. And pension rates are down. A lot of things are going well in our economy. A lot of things are, and it's sort of a quiet time. So what shoe is going to fall next is what I'm wondering. Because a lot of these things are cyclical. And so my question is, I'd like to ask each of you, if it's a quiet, fairly peaceful, good, positive time right now, what challenges do you see on the horizon? What are the 2 or 3 things that you think our district should be preparing for or is preparing for? What big challenges do you see coming next?
I'll go.
Okay, Jennifer?
I think one of the first ongoing challenges that is not going to go away right now is with the governor's proposals of the 50% testing. I know he's quieted down, but who's to say come next year in the future years that he's not going to try to make these changes and actually really put them into effect. So I think that's one problem that I do not think is going to go away. Further than that, I just, it's hard to say. I mean, budget is always an ongoing concern. Things can change if the governor makes a proposal and it doesn't go one way, just like he had proposed that if this one initiative didn't go through, that he would cut funding. So funding is always a big thing, but these proposals that the governor would like to see enacted, I don't think that's going to go away. So I think it's going to come back in future years.
I agree. We haven't seen the last of that for sure, and nor should we have. I mean, those are legitimate questions. But it has been a quiet for many ways. With the tax increases less than, pick a number, the community is quiet. If there's no reductions in staff, then the other community is quiet, so that kind of lends peace. But I think a real challenge for us in the next, say, 5 or 10 years is going to be adjusting how we deliver education with new models involving online learning, a blended learning committee, other things that the superintendent is pushing very aggressively with the help of the assistant superintendent. I think that's going to be a challenge for Burnt Hills. We have the Burnt Hills Way. We have a certain tradition, which is good, and we now have an opportunity to bring in some new things about how we teach students and how we reach more of them and how we offer more variety and different types of learning, things that will be different for us. Education hasn't changed substantially in how it's delivered in 100 years. And we're using computers now, but they're really enhancing instruction. They're really not transforming it. So I think that's clearly going to be a challenge for us, I believe.
Thanks, Christy. Elizabeth Page?
Hi, good evening. My name is Elizabeth Page. You've probably never heard me speak before because I usually don't, even though I'm a teacher. I am a alumni at Burnt Hills from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. I'm a 17-year veteran teacher. And I have some concerns, particularly about the stand that one assessment for teachers is appropriate when you just mentioned Burton Hills has some amazing traditions. I teach in a district just a few miles down the road. And Burton Hills has a very strong, like you mentioned, tradition. We graduate so many kids. We have a very, very small dropout rate. We've been doing things well for hundreds of years. And where I understand that things like STEM and pathways needs to be brought in to keep up with local school districts who are moving forth with that rather quickly, my fear is that we are going to jump on boards of something that I have seen kind of not work all that well. I'm not saying it's not something that we should be doing, but I'm saying I caution jumping into something when everything that we have done for so many years has worked beautifully. My children are in Charlton Heights. They're receiving an amazing education. I worry for the teachers locally. I worry for the teachers in New York State because we're talking about assessments. We're talking about one assessment, and James, you said this. You believe one assessment is how teachers should be evaluated without taking into consideration poverty, homelessness, children who receive Title I, children who receive free and reduced lunch. Those aren't brought into a factor by the governor, and it concerns me that you feel that one evaluation is something that we should stand by, because that shows me that we're not having faith in our principals and superintendents to believe in our teachers, that they are the ones who should be delivering the evaluations on their students. So I'd like you to tell me why you strongly believe that one evaluation for teachers is something that we should stand by.
Thank you.
So again, a couple thoughts on that. I don't think that student progress is the only evaluation criterion that's valid, but it's one of them. 20% weighting seemed to be something that the schools had been adjusting to around the state. It didn't seem like it was a major issue before the recent push to increase that. So is 20% the right number? I don't know. Is 50% the right number? I don't know. But some number is probably something that people can agree to is an important one. And again, there's a lot of confusion because a lot of people think that student performance is the evaluation standard, but it's student progress. So students that come from poverty are lower achievers. In some ways you could consider that to be unfair because teachers in those classrooms have the opportunity to demonstrate more progress with those classrooms than somebody who's got, say, a high achieving class. But the fact that the intention is to normalize that to where the students are at the beginning of the year and how much progress they make through the course of the year, I think that's totally different than how well are the students in that classroom achieving, because that would be unfair. But if you say how much progress are they making, for instance, if Burton Hills has 12 sections of third grade, and they all start at different points, but 11 of them progress, say, 4 levels, let's say, but some other class progresses 5 or 6. You'd want to know why that last one progressed more, even though they all start at different points. You'd want to know why that one class advanced more than the others. And you'd have to take into account that it could be something that the teacher was doing in that one classroom that the 11 were not doing. And I think that's why I think that's a very reasonable, and I don't think jumping in at a 20%, is that significant. And another thought is that the state has to think about all 700 school districts in the state, not just Burton Hills. So Burton Hills has got a strong tradition of academic success, but a lot of districts in the state do not. And that's where he's trying to address that problem. And I don't know that it's fair to them for us to try to undermine that when maybe this is a tool that could really help those districts achieve and get the support that they need to make the performance. So there's more to it, I think, than just saying it's unfair to evaluate teachers on a single test of the students and how well they perform on it.
Jennifer?
Oh, I thought the question was only directed at James.
I think it's for both, isn't it?
Oh,
I think all of them are for both.
I mean, I know from my teaching experience that, to effective teachers, it doesn't just come down to the state exam. The state exam is not measuring 100% effectiveness of everything that's happening day in and day out of the classroom. Do they need measurable tools? Yes. For funding? Yes. Should it weigh heavily on a teacher if they're going to stay employed in the district? No. I think that responsibility comes down to the superintendent and the principals. They are are with those teachers day in and day out. They're with the students, they're dealing with the parents. So ultimately, the power of how a teacher is assessed should come down to the district level and not at a state level. So, I mean, again, I feel that weighing 50% that's personally, to me, that's too much. 20% is more reasonable.
Thanks for that question, Elizabeth. We have one online question I see here on my laptop from a parent. That's all we know. And I'll ask it. Neither the board or the administration have supported in substance the state education department's directive regarding the parent component of shared decision-making. Why has this been allowed, and what would you do to change that?
So say that again, please.
Yeah, what's the question?
Sure. Neither the board, the school board, or the administration, the person writes, have supported in substance the state education department's directives regarding the parent component of shared decision-making. Why has this been allowed, and what would you do to change that?
So I would welcome additional detail on the background behind that question. I think from
Yeah.
my perspective, we feel like we have got parental input. Now, do we always do what the parents want? No, not necessarily, but I think we've always been careful to get parental input. I think our shared decision-making committees have included parents. Yeah, I would welcome some specific example of what we should be doing that we're not.
Okay. Anything to add in that? No?
I mean, again, yes, parents' input is always appreciated and requested, but again, more detail and the specifics of where that question is going is needed.
Okay. Are there any more online questions? No. All right. Anyone? I guess we have a lot of time left, so I guess we'll kind of abandon our card method here. Does anyone have any other questions they might want to ask? Someone different, perhaps? You look familiar. I don't think you're different. Sure. Why not, Christy?
I understood there was a one question per attendee rule.
Yeah.
There it is.
There's one question per person. Is there anyone
The
else?
speaker's out of order.
Until anyone else wants to ask one. I want you to know that I'm the mother of a mechanical engineer, so I'm not opposed to STEM. He graduated from Burn Hills in 2002, and I know he would love some of the new stuff that our high school has been doing the last few years and will be doing even more of with the new STEAM addition. So I'm sorry that he didn't have an opportunity to participate in that. But I also have to tell you that I get pretty frustrated with all this emphasis on STEM, because the arts and communication and history are important too. And I think one of the real strengths of the Burnt Hills education has always been the opportunity that students have to get a well-rounded education here. So I'd like to ask the two of you what you feel is important. What is the district doing now, or what should it be doing to ensure that kids still have opportunities to not only get the leading edge in STEM, and I know we're doing STEAM, so that's good, but not only in STEM, but also in their history classes, their social studies, their English. If they can't communicate, and this isn't just because I was a communication specialist, okay, but if they can't communicate, that all that wonderful STEM will go to waste because they won't be able to tell people about it. So what are we doing to ensure that our programs in English and social studies and the arts and those non-STEM areas are just as strong as they've always been?
Who would like to go
I'll
first?
go. I mean, I just, from being in the classroom and seeing different activities posted, I mean, take for example at Charlton Heights, they They had lots of presentations, so they're practicing on their public speaking and asking questions. People were able to tour the classroom, and it was focused on history. And just asking them the questions and having them be able to answer those in-depth questions, I think at the elementary stage, they're doing a great job in the classroom of emphasizing on all subject areas, not just in the STEAM or the STEM area. I know in terms of in my children's classroom at first grade level, they're giving presentations on a variety of different things. It's not just focused on the STEAM or the STEM aspect. Again, at the elementary level, I think that it all depends on the individual classroom, but they are putting an emphasis on every area.
Another thing to add to that is a couple of years ago, actually a number of years ago now, when the board did have to make some cuts, which I regret, and that's a different story, but for different reasons. But the cuts, as you maybe recall, were very uniformly distributed across the different departments. It wasn't like there were cuts preferentially in science or math or arts or language or any of those. I mean, it was pretty uniform to the point where I was kind of advocating, look, we have to make some strategic decisions as a board here. We have to be able to make decisions about priorities. But maybe the wiser course was to make it more uniform. So, I think the demise of the fine arts has been over-exaggerated. I see broad support from the board. I don't think anybody wants to change that. And I think we can add new STEM classes online and in other ways that won't have to take away resources that might make you view that as a zero-sum game. For that matter, we'd like to do Chinese, and we'd like to do Chinese online, and there are organizational barriers to that. So, I think there's good support for the arts on the board and in the school. And the other thing we do, not to go on, but I think the other thing we do is we try to give equal recognition to people that excel in the arts as we do in sports, thank heavens, and science and technology as well. I think we try to balance. I mean, I see the administration actively trying to balance that recognition for those different areas, so it's not all one-sided.
Thanks. Anyone else have a question? Sure, just state your name and...
Sure. Hi, I'm John Blowers, graduate of Burnt Hills and a parent of 3 middle schoolers. So there's a lot of change going on in education, and a lot of it's being prompted by this Regents reform agenda. And so I've heard lots of things about this. Some say do away with it entirely. Some say, stay the course and as best as possible. If the governor were to call and grant you up to 3 wishes of things that you could change going forward about the Regents reform agenda, whether it be standards, curriculum, testing, data, whatever you call it, if you picked up to 3 things, what are the top couple things that come to mind that you might want to alter about that program?
So I'll tell you a couple things that, so I would not change the standards. I'm just going to come out and I would not change the Common Core learning standards. I like the new standards. And I'm possibly, with the exception of the administration, the only person in here who's actually read the new standards, or maybe you've read them as well, but very few people have actually read them. But I read them, and I've compared them to the old ones, and I like them. I think they're harder, and I want them to be harder, and I like the aspect of the Regents reform agenda that says we want school to be harder. And I like that the cut scores have been changed so that we don't fool ourselves into thinking 85% of our kids are ready for college and career when we know from the statistics about when they graduate that they're not. So, I like those things, and I've challenged over the course of the last several years probably 24 people to bring me some examples from the Common Core learning standards where they don't like them as much as the old ones and where they're deficient compared to the previous ones. And until about a month ago, nobody met that challenge. And then about a month ago, I did get one person who came back, and I actually made a note here somewhere, and said that the thing they didn't like about the new standards was in the numbers-based theory, for the second graders, where it said, explain why addition and subtraction strategies work using place value and the properties of operations, that was inappropriate for second grade. That should be fourth grade. So that's okay. We can have a reasonable discussion about that. But that's the kind of thing I like. So if that's an opportunity to ask, do I like the Common Core standards? Yeah, I think that's a step in the right direction. Now, should it have been phased in? It might have been phased in a little bit better. Should it have gotten more input from the teachers before it was implemented? Yeah, probably. But I also recognize that no implementation of that magnitude is going to be viewed as flawless, no matter who does it, and no matter how it's done. So I think that The process is too political, however. I think there are too many entrenched political interests involved. The governor clearly has got his own, axe to grind. The teachers' associations at the Albany level have their own axe to grind and things to push. So clearly a lot of that is not focused on the best interest of the students, which I think is a big distraction. But those are a couple of things that, that's a couple of comments that I would offer there, John.
Thank you. Jen?
So you were asking about if we could change anything, or okay. Again, like James said, I think if we could go back and change the way that the Common Core was rolled out, absolutely. I do believe that it wasn't rolled out as effective as it could have been. Do I believe in learning standards? Absolutely. Learning standards have been the foundation of education and following as a guideline for teachers. I have not read through all of the Common Core learning standards, so like James has.
It's not highly recommended.
No. But do I believe in learning standards? Absolutely. Do I believe in challenging our kids to think outside the box? Absolutely. I think too many things are taught remotely, and having the students teach and think critically outside the box is going to be the step in the right direction of having them think them for themselves and analyze and come up with decisions for themselves. So again, I would change the rollout.
If I may add, if you think more broadly about that, John, a couple of things that I would like to change if I were the Regents is I would change the tri-borough amendment so that wouldn't be required anymore, and I would change the last in, first out requirement for teacher seniority as the only criterion if a reduction in staff should be required. Those are two things that I think are clearly not in certainly the second. In fact, the second for me is a litmus test on whether you really are for the students or not, because I think there's clearly no student-based reason for having that requirement, which is another reason to support objective evaluations.
Anyone else? Okay.
So this is it's a fair question, but I agree with you that the Common Core, I don't believe it was rolled out effectively. Someone who has read all the standards, we could have coffee together because I'm like a data nerd and I read everything. My question for you is, because I live them every day, I live the APPR every day, how is our district working with parents to make sure they understand the Common Core, that they understand the new standards versus the old standards? Because for someone who lives it every day, I go home and I talk to my kids about it, and my husband looks at me like, you can do this math problem, or whatever. But what are we doing as a district to make sure that those parents who aren't teachers, aren't in education, or obviously take some time to read Common Core state standards on the weekends, what are we doing to make sure they understand it so they're not lost and getting the wrong message?
So that's actually a great question, because one problem with the new standards, particularly the math standards, it is something new for a lot of people. And if you don't have a background in math, or if you haven't learned math that way, it's a different way to think about it. It's more conceptual, so I prefer it, but it's also different, and it seems inefficient, which is beside the point. But so there are some changes. So the board has sponsored at least 3 public meetings on the Common Core standards, on the test requirements, on these things, so parents can understand it. They've been lightly attended, I would say. But in meeting with the teachers, many teachers have established websites, communication that go out. And I forget all the names of the different programs that we have, and I can get some help later on what those are. But links so that students, when you have a problem with this particular type of question, they can go somewhere and get some help on it. I really admire the teachers who have been proactive in trying to communicate that to the parents. And I've gotten good feedback from many parents actually on that. The first year was tough, I think, for a lot of parents. They were learning, the teachers were learning, everybody was trying to figure it out. The second and now the third year seems to have gone, the second and third year seem to have gone much more smoothly. The teachers that I talked to seem pretty well adjusted to it now. And I think many of them say they prefer it, and I think many of the children, they see progress in some of the students as well. Could more have been done? Sure. But I think there have been some very legitimate efforts to help parents understand, the changes and to help them do the math homework with their kids.
I agree too. I mean, the teachers, I think, are doing a fantastic job in communicating. And I know that there are teachers that do have their own webpage, and that the students can go and access and see the whole lesson all over again, taught again, so that parents can view the lesson online that was taught. I do know that there are some differencing opinions on Go Math, but some parents can go and view the lesson and get the strategies from there. There are, in some of the grade levels, the teachers send home parent pages from the math section in the elementary level. And so I know as a parent, I review those things so that I know how to work with my student. But first and foremost, I think it really ultimately is the teachers, and sending a teacher an email and saying, can you please explain this to me? And I can't speak for every teacher, but I know that my children's teachers, they email me back that same evening, or they personally pick up the phone and call me and say, how can I help you? So, I mean, I commend the teachers for just keeping the lines of communication open.
Sure. They're very dedicated.
Yeah.
Great.
And we don't hear that much, really. I mean, we have the program reviews. We don't hear that much now about Common Core difficulties. There's still some concerns for sure, but we don't hear that much. And even the recent petition that we received as a board didn't call for didn't ask for a resolution repealing the Common Core, to call for repealing the Common Core. It raised some other concerns. So, yeah. Anyway, I think people are adjusting to the new standards.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone different? Anyone new? Should I ask a question? Okay, I'm going to bring the questions to a close. Why don't we just finish up tonight? Maybe give each candidate an opportunity, for a minute or so, just to kind of give some final comments with the election coming up and so forth, and we'll have an early night, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to go first?
So again, thanks everybody for attending. It's been a pleasure for me to serve on the board in the last 6 years. I had not intended to serve really more than 2 terms. I think that one of the problems with government these days is that people stay too long in the position and their interests get entrenched. And so I think that that's about right. But should no one else come up, I'm happy to continue to serve and to help where I can. I'm not foolish enough to think that I always have the right answer. I'm just foolish enough to think that if I work with others, we can get to a better solution than not. So, this is important stuff. There are very few things more important than getting a good education for our kids as they start out. And then second to that, my vision of making sure that the district is a place where people want to come. And so I'm happy to continue to help in that way if I can.
Very good, thank you. John?
So again, thank you for everyone and your questions. I mean, honestly, to end things, I came to this role when Elizabeth resigned, and for the past 5 months, I've learned a lot, and I've gained a higher respect for the district and the teachers and the administration. And I feel that a lot of good can come out of working together collaboratively as a board and as a team of the different people that we have to work with. I mean, and ultimately, we all know at the end of the day, it comes down to what's the best interest for our district, what's the best interest for our students, and that's what I want. I grew up here. I came back because of my appreciation and my love for the district. So I'm excited to go into this new adventure.
Thanks. Well, I want to thank our candidates, James and Jennifer, for coming tonight to address some of your questions. I want to thank the audience for coming out, and the people who are watching online. Thank you for tuning in. I think people forget how important it is to just exercise your right to vote and your right to discuss these issues, even though they're not the easiest things all the time. but as some of the candidates say, it's important to have that dialogue. And I just say, don't forget to vote on Tuesday, May 19th, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the high school gym. And we'll see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.